Hi, I'm Jessie. I'm a cannabis nurse and the founder of Marijuana Mommy, and you're watching Patients Are the Proof, where we talk about the real benefits of cannabis. Today, I'm talking with Shanel Lindsay. Shanel is the founder and CEO of Ardent Life Incorporated, based in Boston, Massachusetts. Ardent is a cutting-edge technology and education company that has become a global leader in providing high-tech consumer products to the cannabis space. Ardent is poised for explosive growth in both the cannabis markets as well as the broader health and wellness space. Hello, Shanel. Thank you so much for talking with me this morning. How are you?
Hey, Jesse, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
I am such a huge fan of your product. It's really been a game changer for so many patients, and it's amazing your videos too and your education and what you've done just to create this awareness around decarboxylation. So maybe you could just, for everybody at home, introduce your amazing, incredible product and tell us a little bit about what decarboxylation is and why it's so important.
Awesome, I would love to. So decarboxylation is really the fundamental process when you think about cannabis. If you don't know any other chemical, scientific process related to cannabis, you should know decarboxylation. And to simplify it, what it really means is that all of the cannabinoids like THC and CBD that people are looking for, that patients are looking for their therapy, are actually locked under an acid layer in the raw plant. And what this means for people who think about it kind of like a key going into a lock. And if you want THC or CBD to bind with your cannabinoid receptors, they need to actually be able to fit into and connect with the receptor. And they're not able to do this in the acid form. And so you need to activate or decarboxylate your product in order to get the THC or the CBD. And that can be kind of a complicated explanation or a process. And so what we wanted to do here at Ardent, and me personally, I've been a patient for over 20 years now. And it was very difficult for me when I first started to make my own medicine. And it was because of this decarboxylation process, because as simple as it might sound to kind of activate, what's difficult is doing it without destroying the underlying THC and making sure that you activate all your available CBD and THC so that you only have to use a little bit when you're making your different cannabis therapies. And so that's why I created the Decarboxylator. And what it is a really small precision heating device that uses a couple of sensors and a thermal blanket. That's really the most important part of the whole thing, that we have this thermal blanket that wraps all the way around the device, and it uses multiple sensors to heat your cannabis to the exact right time and temperature and environment to activate all of the THC or CBD without losing any of it underneath. And so for patients, what that means is that they can take a very little amount and make all of the different products that they would see on a dispensary shelf for very little money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I am amazed. So I'm an avid user of the Ardent, and I'm amazed at how much more potent my products are when I use the Ardent compared to the old-fashioned oven method, which I usually used to use. Why is that? Can you explain about why the Ardent works so much more efficiently than a stove would or an oven?
Yeah, and this is also something that was a surprise to me back when I created this device. Is I was using the oven, the toaster oven. The crock pot was one of my favorite methods because, right, you get that even heating from the water boiling.
Mm-hmm.
But what I didn't realize is that decarboxylation is a very sensitive process. So you need to have a really tight temperature profile, but you also have to have incredibly even heating all around, right? And so when you're looking at a crock pot or something that's using a water method, the problem with that is that the temperature is never going to get hot enough to actually fully decarb in a quick manner, right? With sous vide methods or water methods, you're only getting about 70% of decarboxylation before you're starting to destroy some of the underlying THC. And that's something that people see a lot online as a myth of decarboxylation, that you can't get more than 70% decarb or you start to destroy THC. Well, that's based on certain methods, and one of them is the water method. The problem with the oven is a little bit different. The oven can get to higher temperatures, but it's creating that very tight, even heating that's very difficult to achieve in an oven. think about when you're cooking in an oven. The heating elements are above and below, and you're actually, like when you cook a bread, right? It's like crispy on the outside, but then it's, you know, soft on the inside.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, ovens, they don't have cool sensors and the ability to really, really hone in and create this lab grade heating. And that's what we discovered when we went to the laboratory. Basically what I did was I tested all of the different homespun methods, trying to get a predictable, reliable result with decarboxylation, and it was nearly impossible. Even with convection ovens, just because of the fluctuation in temperature, they're really, really not honed in to really be incredibly, incredibly precise in a very small area. And so that's the difference that you see. It's really kind of the elite nature of the electronics and this thermal blanket that wraps completely around and is able to give that very, very even heating, even if you're not breaking up and grinding the buds, which you don't have to do when you're using the device.
Wow. And so I'm always amazed at how many people, and it's not surprising when they, first enter the cannabis, first walk into a dispensary and they go to buy their product and they get their product and then they look and it's THCA and not THC. And so many people don't understand, like you explained, that it has to be activated. The THCA has to be converted into THC in order to be active, the active form. And by smoking or vaping, it does that naturally. But if you're making edibles at home, that's when you really have to decarboxylate.
Yeah,
Another.
absolutely. And Jesse, just a point on that, when you're smoking and vaping, you're definitely decarbing, but you're also destroying a lot of the THC and CBD, right? Because the heat of the flame is so intense that you're destroying a lot of it. And people often decarboxylate and then smoke or vaporize if, number one, they want to get a much stronger experience, because they will get more THC pulled up in the smoke, and they'll also get more CBN.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a lot of people that have trouble sleeping or have PTSD that decarb and then smoke the cannabis. And then you could also decarb and vape, and it allows you to vape at very, very, very low temperatures because the THC is already active and you're just pulling it up into the stream rather than having to decarboxylate and vaporizing it at the same time. So that's an option for folks. Like I said, especially if people have trouble sleeping or they need something that is really going to, calm them. Using those options can be a really interesting way. And that's the beauty of cannabis, is that you can really augment the plant to get the results that you're looking for individually and the results that will help your family.
That's it. Yeah, that's a great point. And so if you're watching at home, you can decarboxylate your cannabis first in the Ardent and then smoke it or vaporize it. And it does create a different experience. And that's something that, I really encourage. We have so many patients who are looking to move away from smoking. But transitioning from smoking to dry herb vaping is often very, very difficult to people. So some patients have found success if they decarboxylate it first and then vape it. You get more of, like you mentioned, the CBN, you get more of those activated cannabinoids that have been activated with the heat already. So that can be a great solution for a lot of people.
Absolutely. It's going to give you a profile that's closer to smoking as far as the cannabinoid intake while vaporizing. And like you mentioned, it is very, very difficult for some people to move from smoking to vaporizing because it just kind of doesn't feel the same to them. So yeah, there are better options for folks, even though the majority of people are using the decarboxylator to activate, to make edibles or topicals or suppositories. And one of the things that I'm always amazed at is still when I see people online and they're using like an ounce of cannabis to make like a couple of sticks of butter, It's crazy when you think about the cost of that, right? And one thing that we found over here is when people realize you can get the same result literally using like 3.5 grams if you're activating it and doing it correctly, then they're able to not just use cannabis and infuse edibles or topicals or things that they're using for their medical purposes. They start to be able to play with it and use it in other ways for beauty aids, or to keep your skin clear, or a lot of these other kind of more over-the-counter type of possibilities for cannabis that I think that people sometimes don't even explore because their current therapies are so expensive. And so that's one of our main goals, to show people, even out of 1 gram, right? If you have 20% THCA, or it's around 21% THCA, you're getting 200 milligrams out of every gram when it comes out. You know, think about that, what that would cost potentially at a dispensary, or especially in states like Massachusetts, where you have like real regulations around how much can be in one serving size, for example. And there are a lot of patients that really need heavy, strong doses, and they realize that they can achieve that through flower when they thought maybe it was only possible through concentrates before. And so it's really about kind of educating people and giving them all of the different options and choices so they can see what works best for them.
Yeah, you know, as you pointed out, here in New Jersey too, it's so expensive, it's exorbitant, it's ridiculous. And we also have limitations on how much we can access. We can only access 3 ounces a month, which is plenty for many people, but for a lot of people, it's not enough. And the Ardent truly does, you know, increase the efficiency and the potency, and that really, really makes your flower stretch longer. So it is a great money-saving option for so many people. You know what else I love about the Ardent? You can actually infuse small amounts of oils and butters and different substances.
Yeah, absolutely. That was something folks who had the device for a while when we came out with that testing results. And that's something that we're really proud of too, just a lot of testing, because there's so much conjecture online about all of this stuff, right? And really, the science doesn't lie. And what doesn't really work is when people try to use kind of, you know, logic and other testing results to predict what's going to happen in other places. No, you actually really just need to have the underlying data to show what's happening. And you know, we were really proud to show that you can, after your decarboxylate, that you can put the cannabis back in with your oil or your butter, and you can use our infusion sleeve, but you can also use a glass jar or a stainless steel
Shot glass. I've used a shot glass before.
Yes, yeah.
Fits perfectly.
That is perfect because it's a nice small amount, and you can actually get very, very potent oils. We've used up to 4 grams in 1 ounce. It kind of becomes impractical after that, and we say concentrates, but we were able to get over 700 milligrams into an ounce.
Wow.
Right in the unit. And we've shown really, really high infusion rates of over 90% for almost all of the oils we tested. It started going down into the lower 80s when we started, you know, cranking up the doses, right, with 4 grams in there. But yeah, we really had to be able to show people that, yeah, you can make potent oil just using 1 gram of cannabis. And if you go on our website, that's often how we do the test: 1 ounce of oil or butter to 1 gram of cannabis, because it's really to open people's minds that, like, wow, look what you can get out of just 1 single gram. That's enough to make, you know, enough edibles for an entire dinner party, you know. That is really exciting to people, and we really want to kind of change folks' minds about what is possible with just a little bit.
Okay, so that's amazing. Shanel, like, okay, I know you're an attorney, right?
Yeah.
So how on earth did you get involved in this? Where did this product come from? How did you get involved in the cannabis industry to even start with?
So when I first got involved with cannabis, it really had nothing to do with my profession. I was my son was born. I had him when I was in college, and I started using cannabis to treat an ovarian cyst that I had, and that required me to start doing things with decarboxylation, right? Not just smoking it, which is what I had done before. I started researching and making topicals and edibles, and obviously you come across this concept of decarboxylation, and it was very frustrating to me in the beginning because I was using tons of cannabis to start with. It was very, very smelly. It was not discreet, and this was back in the day when it was very, very illegal. And this was something that would eventually jeopardize my legal career. About 5 or 6 years into using cannabis, I was growing my own medicine at home because, as you know, it's very difficult to find quality medicine, you know, when you don't have any control over it and when there's no legal access to cannabis. And so I was growing my own medicine, and honestly, it's something we still fight for now to make sure people can grow their own. I think that's so, so important. But at that time, again, it was really illegal. I got pulled over and I had my cannabis with me, and I got arrested instead of just getting a ticket, which at that time, cannabis was technically decriminalized in Massachusetts. But it really showed me that there were still many, many people and patients that were, going to be marginalized and disproportionately impacted by the fact that it wasn't fully legal. And so that was really a wake-up call to me that, something needed to be done there, and that there's still so much stigma around cannabis use, right? Even though I had been an accomplished attorney and, was professionally succeeding, the fact that I used cannabis would almost put all of that, almost flushed all of that down the drain. And so for a couple more years, I still was a lawyer. And then I saw the opportunity when medical marijuana became legal in Massachusetts to go and to start to pursue teaching and educating people about the process. And that's when I started going and testing my medicine in the laboratory and got those really surprising results because, at first I was just going to teach people the method that I had done, the crock pot. And I thought that, hey, I was going to go and test my medicine and it was going to be perfect. And then I was really surprised to see how much I was wasting, 30 to 40%, based on all the different, kitchen methods. And I thought, wow, this is going to keep a lot of people from using this, right, or understanding, because at that point I had been doing this for 10 years. And so if I was doing it for 10 years and I was still frustrated with the process and I still wasn't getting like the best medicine at the end of the day, what real chance did people who were just starting to learn about this, that had serious health conditions, that, didn't want to be a cannabis nerd like I was and do all the science and do all the experiments, and still if they did, they would still end up with an inferior product. And so that's kind of when the light bulb moment happened for me. And I said, hey, if I can create a device that can replicate the conditions that we found worked well in the laboratory, then I could, make this happen. And I've always liked to build and tinker with things and kind of, figure things out on my own. And so I went and sketched it out. And I knew that even heating, I knew that I needed to have that heater wrapped all the way around there, because that was something that was, really clear to me that was a problem with like the current methods, right? Think of anything in your kitchen. There's always just like a heating element, like underneath or somewhere, and that's why you always have to stir, or it's getting burnt somewhere. And so having that heating element and sensors where they were, and I really just went around and found different suppliers that could make these different pieces, and I put them all together and prayed that when I pressed the button it worked, and actually it took a couple times pressing it and reworking it, and then finally it did, and that's what allowed us to bring beta markets to bear, and then go into full production. And now we're a real company.
It's amazing. And it's being used by so many people who really, really need it. And you mentioned one of my favorite features about it too, which we didn't even touch on yet, the smell. Because the smell is a huge, huge, huge issue for so many patients and so many cannabis consumers. It can still get people, arrested. Cooking cannabis in the oven smells intensely. Your whole house is going to smell like cannabis. But I was amazed the first time I used my Ardent, and my house did not smell like cannabis, and I only smelled a little bit, like right around the machine, and when I opened it, and that was huge and amazing. Do you get a lot of comments about that?
Yes, definitely. And like I said, when I was making this when I was a young mom, I had my own house, and the family on the next acre could smell it when I was making in my crock pot. So that was definitely a big problem. So we created this, so there's silicone seal here, and it's really, really encapsulated, and like you said, you're smelling nothing or very little when you're like right on top of the machine. And what we tell people is when you open it, one thing you can do to reduce the smell is let it cool down completely before you open it, because it is cannabis, and when you do open it, you will definitely get a whiff of everything inside. But yes, the discretion part, the fact that you can have this on the other side of the room and people don't know what it is or what's going on, is huge for people. And we get a lot of comments, especially for people that live in apartments or live with roommates, especially because they want to be respectful. Part of what you want to do is be a good cannabis ambassadors, make sure that you are being a conscious consumer and bringing people into the fold. And sometimes that means not being super smelly, especially if you're making products in your home over and over and on a regular basis. So that is something that, people reach out and say a lot to us, that they appreciate that discretion, especially when it comes to the fact that, people are still facing discrimination in their housing from their landlords. And yeah, and it can be very difficult for folks, and folks who are, in graduate school, or, in living situations where there are rules around this. It really makes it a possibility where it wasn't before.
It's amazing. And I admire you so much, not only for this incredible device, but you've done so much work out in Massachusetts with the laws and bringing legalization. Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much for your work for all of us. And, gosh, I know it's just a matter of time before we get federal legalization, but it's coming. It's so, feels so far away still.
Well, yeah, and it was a huge community effort here. I think that one thing we did right in Massachusetts was putting the spotlight on equity and the need to make sure that, that people who have been disproportionately impacted, people who have been arrested, small business people, that this should be a craft industry, right? That this is built on the backs of people of color, that this was an industry that was pushed forward by caregivers and people who cared about patients and cared about making good medicine. And that is not something that we should move away from as cannabis is being commercialized and brought into kind of the mainstream. Those are ideals that we should hold on to, that we should protect. And I think that in Massachusetts, the community really came together around that. And I see that also happening, in the tri-state area. And I know that New Jersey has had such a difficult time, especially under Christie. Even
it destroyed the program.
Yeah, patients. I mean, that was so terrible, but it is really exciting to see the movement now in all of the surrounding states, especially on the East Coast. I'm a Boston native, and so I am so excited to see kind of what we've done in Massachusetts flow down there and be improved. Right, there's so much that we could have done better here too, and I'm really hoping that we see that, trickle all the way down into the South as well, because that really is uncharted territory. And we see kind of corporate interests moving in, and where sometimes you see the most vulnerable population, right? So I think there's still a lot of work to be done. And I would just encourage everybody to get involved, because one thing I've seen is just how powerful the individual voice can be, even if people are not known in the space. Their story is powerful, and especially people who have, stories about how cannabis has helped them as a medicine, stories about how their lives have been impacted, and how this needs to really remain something that is true to, to the community.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, if you're at home watching, please speak up, share your story if it's safe for you to do so, because it can really, really make a big impact on everybody and on the actual process of legalization. I think that's a great place to wrap up. Is there anything else you want to add?
No, this is really fantastic, and I really love the fact that more women are getting involved in cannabis, and I think that's something that we need to push forward as well. About 2 years ago, you would see that women were in really strong leadership positions in cannabis. And over the last couple of years, believe it or not, that has actually been diluted a little bit because of all of the large businesses coming in and kind of traditional corporate values starting to come into place. And
take
so
over.
So I would just really encourage women to continue to get involved, continue to learn about this plant. There are really a lot of opportunities for whatever your professional background is to get involved in this space and to use it. And even if it's not getting involved in the professional side, and understanding this plant and getting the knowledge on your own, so that you can make these products, you can understand how they can help your family and friends, and that they can replace really kind of harmful things like, alcohol in large amounts, or, benzos, or other, things that
opiates.
Opiates, especially, that things that women tend to, bear the brunt of in some respects, right? Because we are responsible for the household, we're responsible for, making things work. And that can be a huge responsibility, and I think that cannabis can help in so many different ways, from medical to wellness, to just reaching a higher consciousness and having a better
the spiritual
life.
effects are amazing, definitely.
Absolutely. So I just applaud what you're doing, and thank you again for having us today.
Thank you. And where can people purchase their own Ardent?
Yeah, so take a look on our website, ardentcannabis.com, Ardent, and I know, Jessica, you have some awesome discounts to share with your audience as well, and we're really excited to continue to hear feedback, because what we are doing, and you'll see that we have more of our edibles kits and our medical kits coming out, but our goal is to make it so that anybody, wherever they are, can use and have the benefits of the best products on the marketplace. And so we'd love to hear the feedback about, what people and what the audience is looking for, and what things would help folks get to their goals when it comes to cannabis. So we'd love to hear more, and love to come back one day as well.
I love it. Thank you so much. Thank you for creating a device that has changed my life and so many other people's. And thank you for your work. Truly, truly appreciate it.